So I'm going to talk about futures. And predicting the future is always, you're a hostage to fortune. So be very careful who you listen to. So the Centre for the Digital Future, illuminating what's next. 2013, printed newspapers, only 5 years. But as they say here, well, their survival turns out to be a little more delayed than we thought. We've been hearing a lot about print is dead, it's not going to survive anything. And lots of people are saying it, and people who really we listen to. So Jeff Bezos, books aren't dead, they're just going digital. No, they're not, Jeff. And Egon, who, as we know, is one of the great philosophers of the world in Ghostbusters, print is dead in 1984. Not quite right. So I'm going to share some numbers about that. But before I do that, this appeared in my news feed at the end of October. It's Bloomsbury Publications. They own Harry Potter, but they own a lot of other things as well. And at the end of October, they announced our highest ever first half sales and profits. 122.9 million, up from 100.7. 13.9 million of their total turnover is in digital services. The rest of it is physical books and physical items. So people have been telling me that print is dying for years and years, and they're not always right, because print is relevant and can be relevant. And I'm going to share some information about European print markets. I've got my Smithers hat on today, and we're about to publish a report, when I finish writing it, the future of European print over the next 5 years. I'm going to share some numbers from that. I'm going to talk about some of the drivers for sustainability. This is good having a breeze blowing through here, so this is making my presentation really come to life. I'm going to talk a little bit about the changing nature of print manufacture, because I think this is what is really happening. And this is what the impact of digital, it's been around for a long time, is actually doing. It's changing the business models, the routes to market. Excellent, I've got Marcus working for me, this is really good. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples, because print is still a powerful medium. So look at this. This is a billboard that was put up on Monday of this week in Wakefield. Advertising something, oh dear, 80 days afterwards, there's 5 billboards in a row. And here we are, cometh the hour, cometh the one, at true Tory budgets at the Daily Mail. It's actually not an advert for the Daily Mail. It's a political statement about some things that are happening there. But it's relevant because it was printed. Now, I should point out that this is not Smithers' official view of the market, but it may be some people that work for Smithers occasionally believe that things like that are right. Now, for those of you who don't know me, and I see a lot of faces which I haven't seen for years, so I'm delighted to see real people. I'm a print techie, and I work for Smithers as an analyst and a consultant, and I say I've written a couple of books for them. I talk at conferences as I'm doing today. I act as a journalist. Basically, anybody who wants to give me money, I'll write for them. But I've also owned commercial print companies, and I occasionally get my fingers dirty in labels and for that. And I've written these reports, and I set up the Whitmar's digital labels and packaging a few years ago. I managed to escape from that, but I still write for it. But we've just been working on market data, so I'm going to share some data. Now, when people give you data forecasting values and volumes, be very careful what they're saying. I'm going to present this data in constant value euro terms. So this is fixed last year. I always like constant value because for the last 20 odd years, 25 years, we haven't had to worry about inflation, but we do now. And we particularly have to worry about what's happening in the industry, which I'm calling printflation 22, because there's some weird things happening there. So I'm actually going to give you some current value figures as well. And then output in terms of the equivalent of billion A4 prints. And this is what a 10-year forecast of the market's going to be. In Europe, about $175 billion in euros, sorry, in 2017. Dropped in 2020. I can't remember why it did that, but there must something happen. And then it comes back. And the overall market for print and printed packaging and labels is growing. If anybody's taking pictures, they say, I assume you're not taking pictures of me, you're taking pictures of that, but I'm very happy to give you a copy of the presentation should you want it. In yellow, this is current values. So this includes impacts of inflation, it includes impacts of currency fluctuations. So it went down, 2021 values are the same, so that's why they're the same. But because every year we have 2 or 3 or 10% inflation now, things are happening. Much of that is due to the price rises. As someone told me, well, if you can't get a price rise today, you're really not trying very hard. But as we go forward, inflation is driving the market higher. And now a lot of that is due to packaging. So this is a rather complicated slide. The blocks are volumes of print, numbers of A4. The lines are publication, not good news, going down. General graphics print, it declined and it's going down slightly, but not too badly. You add the two of those together, you get the total value of graphics. So this is print on paper, commercial print, publishing, newspapers, books, whatever. The yellow line is labels and packaging, and that's what's driving growth in print, not conventional, traditional physical print properties. If you look at the volumes, the green line is the very sad graphics line. Blue line is publishing, still huge. There's an awful lot of newspapers still going to be printed in 2027, but nowhere near as many as there were last year across Europe in that. So generally, well, overall the market's growing, and this is why most companies are supplying them, whether you're a commercial print company, whether you're a manufacturer of a technology, you're moving toward labels and packaging because you can't get milk out of an iPad. You can't get milk out of an iPad in more ways than one, as I know after my granddaughter was round a couple of weeks ago. But you certainly can't get it delivered to your house in a way that you'd want to use it. Because print is actually pretty good at doing what it does. But the drivers and the pressures are on it of cost reduction, speed to market, sustainability. Marcus Fraser talked a little bit about sustainability. We heard about it in the last presentation from David. It's the key driver for the next 5 years. It's going to trust everything about us. We can do clever things with it. We can embellish it. We can make it more sexy. We can add varnishes or spot colours and all sorts of things. And we can innovate. And people still are innovating, and they're doing very interesting things with boring ink on paper, but also publications and things, because you have to make it relevant. Now, I said newspapers are dying on their feet. Well, not all newspapers are dying. This is Die Zeit, a weekly German newspaper. Record levels from the last audited circulation figures at the end of 2021, much higher than they've ever had before, because they're changing the way they market and the content in the newspaper. So some bits of boring ink on paper, if you get it right and make it appropriate for your audience, is doing extremely well, thank you. Of course, not all bits are. So this was from a couple of days ago. Pritavis, the last publication rotogravure supplier in the UK, closing or announcing its closure and leaving us with one large magazine printer. My friend is the production director of Bauer, not very happy about that, but I've told him it's his own silly fault. But in magazines, interesting things happen in there. So as the general decline falls, I don't know if anyone knows Jocko Winterscheid, but he's an influencer. And in 2018, Gruner & Jahr, a sensible German publisher, launched his first JWD magazine, 200,000 copies. Settled down at 50,000 copies. They stopped doing it during the pandemic. But this is a magazine, a physical magazine for an internet influencer. I'm surprised I haven't seen some of your faces on the cover of this, which I'm sure you all attend to, but publications find a way of doing interesting things and new. So the print is still relevant to certain degrees. If we look at the growth rates of the different print processes involved, because we're focusing on inkjet, I thought I'd better give you some good news here. So in value terms, boring analog, well, it's on the wrong side of zero. It's declining, with the exception of flexo, which is widely used in packaging. So the orange bit is the 5-year compound annual growth rates over the next 5 years, the projected growth across all of Europe. The grey line is what's going to happen over 10 years in terms of volume and value. And lo and behold, because it's an inkjet audience, you might be quite happy to see that we think the value of printed inkjet is going to be double what it was over a 10-year period, and that's in real terms, excluding impacts of inflation. Put inflation in there, it's probably going to be 3 times as big as it was in 2017. And the volume, far higher, 160% up over a 10-year period. Obviously, it's going to indicate that the cost is going to fall over the period, which is exactly what happens as new technologies, faster machines, lower unit costs, lower ink costs come through in there. All digital is doing reasonably well. Electrophotography, toner printing declining. Part of the reason for that is that some of the SRA3, the colour digital presses, are being eaten by some more productive inkjet alternatives. But also you're seeing a significant decline in the amount of monotoner overprinting in direct mail, in security applications, and in transactional print, which are being eaten up by colour, single pass electrophotography. So if you're involved in inkjet, you can have a nice smug smile. If you're involved in some of the other analog processes, you better get on and redesign your processes and do things, because they're not going to be doing particularly well over the next 10 years. So that's the forecast. When we look at and develop these forecasts, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at the economics, and that's the general macroeconomic sphere, which is in pretty not good state in some European countries at the moment. And also we look at the individual unit cost of production, the cost of a particular campaign. Do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that? What's it going to cost me if I do it in inkjet versus toner versus litho versus whatever? And there's increasing competition. Everybody is fighting for this smaller pie. Excuse me. We've talked about supply chain. The pandemic, we saw you couldn't buy a whole range of goods. The supermarkets, if you were brave enough to go into a supermarket, you hadn't got any, and you couldn't get on to get a home delivery for about 8 months at one stage. Brands don't like that. And they don't like stockouts through whatever reason. And they are taking major steps to ensure they don't happen again. That's impacting producers of packaging, it's impacting producers of labels, and also impacting production of general print. Instead of making a lot of it, putting it in stock, well, we'll only make what we want, but you've got to make sure we do it when we want it and where we want it. And I might actually do it myself rather than buying it from an alternative supplier, if the systems are easy enough, or well, with some digital technologies and inkjets, they are, and you're seeing changing in the location and the people who are doing some of the print manufacturing now. Supply chain, quite an interesting topic, and but it's changing. Equally, within there is the retail changes, the growth in e-commerce, the decline in high street shops for lots of things. We're looking at the performance of equipment, high press speeds, more automation, reduce make ready. We're doing print more cleverly. We'll combine jobs together and do 6 jobs but only do 1 make ready, reduce the waste. All of a sudden, a large format litho machine is competitive against a toner press at less than 100 copies in terms of economics. We want more agility. Well, I might want 50,000 or I might want 5,000. I'm not going to know till tomorrow, but I want them the next day. So how, as a print supplier, do I serve that in there? So we're getting all of these things changing through. This is not actually what I wanted to show, but never mind. Talking about sustainability is going to be the big topic. I thought this was taken out, but obviously it wasn't. And using an example of great literature in Mad Men. And if you know Mad Men, it has some shocking bits in it. So the hero has 19 mistresses. Yes, it seems to have an awful lot more of that. It's set in New York in the sort of 50s and 60s, and you drink in the office. I mean, having milk and vodka is particularly shocking in my view. You smoke a lot in those days. There's a spoiler here, it doesn't end well for all things. You even commit suicide in the office. But all of that is not as shocking as what they did when the family Draper went out for a picnic. And I'm watching this at home with my wife and a couple of members of my family, and they were having a picnic and whatever was happening there. And then at the end of it, she stands up and just throws away all of the picnic things, leaves them on the grass and drives off. And I thought, bloody hell, you don't do that anymore. Sustainability, it's actually getting into reality. And it's becoming more and more of the way that people operate. And it's certainly the way that people operate in print and in packaging. We have to be more sustainable. It's the key driver, we think, for packaging, also for printing going forward. We're going to get into a circular economy, certainly in some areas. We have to use renewable resources. Print is seen as being bad, even though it's actually probably reasonably good, certainly in terms of sustainability. But digital print and digital packaging offer major advantages over analog, and this is one of the key reasons that they're surviving. And it's a message that you need to get through. No plates and cylinders, obvious. Reduction in setup waste, yes, you can down weight and use lighter weight materials, less materials. You can respond to demand far more easily. But what we do need is real science telling us this, rather than the greenwash and the other areas there. We're seeing kickback from those nice people who are gluing themselves to the M25. They don't like some of the electronic billboards in there. But we need proper scientific life cycle analysis. We've got the 22067 is going to be a new buzzword that everyone is going to be using if you're in print and print manufacturing. But this is only part of the area. We need really good science and good case studies explaining the benefits, and we'll do it. Now, I'm going to finish in a few minutes, but the other thing, apart from the numbers, is it's getting increasingly difficult to track the change. I haven't got my glasses on, so I can't actually see how many minutes that says there, so in there. But it's what we're starting to think of is the democratization of print. And it's no longer just print companies that do printing. Because with inkjet, with digital methods, more skill, more automation reduces the amount of skills, traditional skills that are needed. It's reducing the entry level to printing. And at the same time, with the online print community becoming ever more sophisticated, more able to do things, more companies think, well, why on earth do I need to go out and buy myself a new press? I'll just keep my relationship with my customers and let somebody else who's good at doing printing in there. And more print companies are starting to buy rather than make, which is a big change from the whole thought processes of printing. And we're seeing disintermediation of buyer and supplier. And this is an organization in Italy. Apparently, they make handbag accessories, which is something that I didn't even know existed. But they do all sorts of weird and wonderful shoes, handbags, and things that go with handbags in the high fashion sector, which, as you can see, is probably not where I normally live. But they bought themselves an inkjet machine, a Swiss Q print device, And they now start doing some really weird and wonderful things, integrating the design with the production and doing it themselves and getting all sorts of areas in there. And this is a company that manufactures leather goods, is now doing things that a print company would have done for them. And you're seeing more and more of this. You're seeing inkjet machines appearing in manufacturers, appearing in retailers and doing all sorts of things. So you'll be pleased to know, Fraser, I'm about to shut up in a minute. So what does all this add up to? Well, we're seeing changes in the print markets. Publishing's down a lot, books doing quite well though. Labels and packaging are growing, and they're going to be the drivers for the traditional print market going forward. We're seeing huge impacts this year as printflation bites, people putting surcharges and all sorts of things. But we're seeing print now being adopted by people that used to buy it. They're printing for use rather than printing for profit. Doing smaller orders, it doesn't have to be highly productive, it needs to be where it wants, where it rates, because it's still relevant as part of a manufacturing area. And you're seeing the traditional print suppliers and packaging suppliers no longer just wedded to print production. They're offering better services, better range of activities to their potential customers.